Haunted CEO never smiled in 20 years. Then he heard the secretary's insane song at midnight. In a glimmering skyscraper that scratched the belly of the night sky, Douglas Anderson was a name that echoed across the boardrooms of Wall Street. But it wasn't he for his victories, it was for the wall he built around himself. The man hadn't smiled in 20 years, a cold emptiness masking the once warm eyes that glared like two stormy clouds. No laughter danced in his office. It was a graveyard of shattered dreams, and every employee walked on eggshells, terrified that a single misstep might unleash his long-festering wrath. On this fateful night, the full moon spilled silver light through the glass walls, illuminating the floor where whispers turned into shadows. There was an air of mystery that fizzled and sparked like a live wire. A song, so strange and haunting, drifted through the air, sending chills down spines. It was after midnight, a time when most were nestled in cozy beds, yet Douglas found himself alone, steadfastly reviewing paperwork that seemed to spawn like weeds. But then he heard it, a voice as sweet as honey but laced with an unsettling edge. It crept into the corners of his mind, filling the stark silence. The sound was the kind that made the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. He leaned closer to the door, heart pounding in his chest, as the melody twisted and turned in the hallway. Who could it be? And why now? Was it Melody, his secretary? She had a knack for weaving tunes, but never in the office, at least, not like this. The notes were wild, bizarre. They echoed like a siren's call, relentless and demanding. Each pitch sent him spiraling deeper into the abyss of curiosity and dread. This was not an ordinary song, it was something ethereal, something that suggested secrets buried under layers of corporate greed were rising to the surface. As he stood frozen in the darkness, it felt like the whole building was holding its breath, waiting for his next move. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. With the reverberating echoes still wrapping around him, Douglas stepped out of his haven, curiosity propelling his feet forward. What kind of spell had Melody cast? He had never noticed the way she used her voice, weaving magic that could ensnare anyone listening. But now the walls seemed to pulse, like they were alive, filled with secrets yearning to be set free. He approached her office and noticed the faint glow spilling from under the door. The melody grew louder, and suddenly, he felt an inexplicable urge to push the door open. What if she was summoning something more than just music? Could it be the answer to the years he spent trapped in bitterness? Or a darkness that could consume his very soul? As he reached for the handle, his heart raced, each beat a countdown to revelation. What lay behind that door, waiting for him in the gleaming light? Would it finally break the curse of his silence, or seal his fate forever? As Douglas's trembling fingers brushed the cool metallic handle, a surge of adrenaline coursed through him. He almost flinched back. What if the song was not a harbinger of peace, but a siren heralding chaos? Taking a deep breath, he swung the door open, the hinges creaking as if protesting the intrusion. The instant he stepped inside, he was engulfed by the intoxicating melody. It wrapped around him like a silken web, inviting and suffocating all at once. Melody was standing in the middle of her office, eyes closed, lost in a world far removed from the dimly lit cubicles of Anderson Enterprises. Her hair flowed like liquid silk, catching the moonlight streaming through the massive windows. The glow transformed her into an otherworldly figure. She was a siren, weaving a spell that danced through the air, pulling at the strings of his heart. Melody? His voice trembled, breaking the magical aura like a burst bubble. She jolted, eyes flying open to reveal an unsettling depth, glassy and almost feral. The song halted, a sudden silence that was deafening. Douglas. She gasped, surprise etched on her face. I didn't expect you to come in. Didn't he expect me? His voice shot up, confusion swirling. What was that song? What are you doing? It helps me think, she stammered, glancing at the scattered papers around her, blueprints, charts, scribbled notes. It was a chaotic mess, but within the chaos held a glimmer of brilliance. However, as he looked closer, a shiver raced down his spine. She was surrounded by shadows, dark stains emerging from the corners of the room. What do you mean, think? He pressed. It's not just a song. That felt different. She took a cautious step back, eyes darting to the shadows lurking in the corners. It's more than what you see. I find clarity in the music. It reveals things we buried deep under layers of profit and loss. His chest tightened. Over the years, he had transformed into the ruthless CEO, believing that cold calculations were his only means to prevail in an unforgiving world. But now, her words unraveled a dark thread within him, weaving regret into the fabric of his existence. What things? The company has secrets, Douglas. Secrets hidden even from you, she said. The tone of her voice morphed, mixing urgency with an undercurrent of fear. What secrets? He whispered, stepping closer, drawn by something deep within her gaze. Tell me. Before she could respond, the lights flickered ominously overhead. A chill raced along the back of his neck. The shadows around them stirred as if alive, as a low rumble tremored through the skyscraper's foundations. The song did not merely resonate, it awakened something dark. Douglas, we need to leave. Her eyes widened in panic as she reached for his arm. He hesitated, rooted in place. What lay outside this room? The familiar facade of his empire or a world fraught with jeopardy? The air thickened, filling with dread and an undeniable compulsion to know the truth. Just as he was about to pull away from her grasp, a window shattered, cascading shards of glass into the room. Run! She shouted, her voice slicing through the tension. But in that fleeting moment, as adrenaline surged, a new melody began to echo, darker and more sinister. What had he awakened? With wild hearts pounding, they raced toward the door, but the shadows throbbed, threatening to consume them both. In that instant of despair, he realized some truths were better left buried. As they bolted down the hallway, a chilling thought settled in Douglas's mind. What if the secrets of Anderson Enterprises were not just professional, but profoundly personal? With that thought racing through his mind, they emerged into the chaotic silence of the office floor, the fate of their souls hanging in the balance. What had they stirred within the very core of the company? Would any escape its grasp? The hallway stretched before them, filled with ominous silhouettes and an unnatural stillness that seemed to breathe with each fleeting moment. Douglas and Melody sprinted, their hurried footsteps echoing off the chilled walls. The urgency of their escape amplified with every beat of his heart. What is happening? Douglas shouted over the pounding in his ears. Why is this happening? Melody didn't reply, her focus locked ahead as she swerved into a nearby stairwell. The fluorescent lights flickered above, casting erratic shadows that danced like dark specters. We can't stay exposed, she gasped, the fear thick in her voice. They burst into the stairwell, and she slammed the door behind them, heart hammering a frantic rhythm. As they descended, a heavy silence enveloped them, broken only by the sound of their breath. Those shadows, they felt alive, Douglas managed, trying to piece together the fragments of the chaotic scene they had just fled. What did you mean by secrets? What does Anderson Enterprises really do? Melody paused, her fingers sliding against the railing as she caught her breath. The music. It reveals the truth buried in our souls, Douglas. I've seen things, documents, conversations, things I never should have heard. Her voice dropped to a whisper, laden with dread. The company is involved in darker deals than what anyone could imagine. Douglas's stomach twisted at her words, and a bead of sweat rolled down his back. What kind of deals? I don't know every detail, but I suspect our work goes beyond just profits and losses. There are people in power who will do anything to protect those secrets. The shadows, they're not just metaphorical. They are real, and they're hunting us. At the bottom of the stairwell, they pushed through a heavy steel door into the lobby of Anderson Enterprises. A sense of normality hit him like a brick wall. Employees milled about, oblivious to the imminent danger. How is everyone so calm? Look, she said, urgency returning to her voice. We need to get out. We can't risk anyone seeing us. He could feel the primal instinct to bolt seize him, but he hesitated. I need to know what's out there. I can't just run, you have to. She pulled him toward the exit. If they realize we know, they'll come for us. Their escape led them into the bright city streets, sensory overload striking Douglas like a punch. The neon lights, honking cars, late-night revelers, it all felt so normal. But that normalcy clashed violently with the chaos that brewed inside his mind. What now? He asked, panting as they stepped into the moving tide of pedestrians. First, we need to find a place to hide and regroup, she said, her eyes scanning the crowd. There are people who can help us, but we need to stay off the radar. As they melted into the crowd, Douglas's mind raced. Should he trust her? This was a woman who had been singing a melody of madness within the confines of an office, a siren-esque call that had awakened something terrifying. But deep down, he felt compelled to heed her warning. What if every note she sang was a key to understanding the hidden darkness of his own life? An unsettling realization closed around him. The music didn't just reveal the company's secrets, it threatened to unravel his very identity. Melody, he said suddenly, fear rising like bile in his throat. If there are secrets, does that mean my life has been a lie? Her face paled, and in that moment, a glimmer of comprehension flashed in her eyes, one that mirrored his own dread. We need to find out the truth, Douglas. For both of us. But even as she spoke, a mournful echo began to rise from the depths of buildings around them, a haunting refrain that gripped Douglas like an icy hand. He felt the shadows creeping closer, pulling at the edges of his consciousness, beckoning him back toward the darkness, what lay behind the secrets they were trying to expose. And more importantly, what lurked within his own past, with his pulse racing and the city lights flickering ominously. He faced the frightening reality. He had unleashed a chaos that threatened to consume everything he had once known. And in that moment, the ground beneath them trembled, sending another shockwave through the city as though the world itself was alive, responding to their awakening. What waited in the shadows was something far more menacing than they could imagine. Would they uncover the truth before it was too late? The world spun around Douglas as they navigated through the throngs of people. He was acutely aware of every rushed heartbeat, every whispered conversation floating past him. The crowd, seemingly untroubled, only intensified his fear. He stole a glance at Melody. Her brow was furrowed, focusing on something just beyond his sight. Where do we go? He asked, his chest tightening as uncertainty settled in. There's a diner a couple of blocks from here. It's open all night. We can hide there, she replied, urgency lacing her words. Her grip tightened around his arm as they pushed forward. As they rounded the corner, the diner's neon sign flickered into view, casting eerie shadows in the alleyway. The entrance stood like an inviting portal amidst chaos. Yet, as they approached, the diner felt more like a trap. They slipped inside, the bell above the door chiming eerily in the silence. Inside, an old man sat alone at the counter, sipping coffee, his head tilted back against the walls decorated with fading photographs. A waitress wiped down the counter, eyeing them warily. Coffee? She asked, her voice steady as she pointed toward the empty seats. Not now, Melody replied, her tone clipped. She led Douglas to a booth tucked away in the corner. They slid in, their breaths still rapid from their escape. What do we do? Douglas murmured, rubbing his hands together to warm them. How do we figure out what's going on without getting dragged back into whatever that is? We dig deeper. We have to figure out what Anderson Enterprises is hiding, what the music actually does. Her voice trailed off as a heavy silence crashed around them. She leaned closer, her eyes shining with resolve. We have to find out the files. I saw the ones that showed how far they're willing to go to protect their secrets. Douglas bit his lip, heart pounding in rhythm with his thoughts. But what if they find out? What if we're not safe here? Then we show them how good we are at hiding, she whispered fiercely. Just then, The diner's door swung open, a gust of wind rushing in. Two figures stepped inside, shaking off the rain. They were wearing dark suits, and Douglas felt a chill creep down his spine as he recognized their faces, people he knew from the office. This was no coincidence. "Let us go," Melody whispered, her fear cutting through the haze of disbelief. They scooted deeper into the booth as the men approached the counter. Douglas's heartbeat thundered louder, thoughts racing. If they were here, it meant the shadows were already hunting them. "Did you see them?" one of the men said, his voice carrying just enough for them to hear. She was right, they've gone into hiding. "Move fast." Douglas's stomach dropped. They didn't just sense their escape, they were tracking them. He glanced at Melody, realizing their time was already running out. "Under the table," he hissed, crouching down with her. They slid under the booth, hearts racing, breaths steady. The world beyond was blurred by fear and the weight of the situation. As the suited men's voices faded, Douglas felt suffocated by the shadows creeping closer once again. He could still hear the mournful echo, a distant hum growing louder, swirling around him like a predator stalking its prey. What had Melody awakened? And what darkness clung to him, whispering in the back of his mind, almost as if warning him what he might uncover? Suddenly, the door swung open again, accompanied by an unexpected light. A figure strode in, striking and confident, yet eerily familiar. Douglas's heart nearly stopped. Could this be the key to unlocking everything? Or would it drag him deeper into a realm of nightmares? They needed answers, and whatever this figure wanted to reveal could lead them right into the heart of the storm. Would they stand up to the shadows head-on, or would they be swallowed whole by the truth? The figure stepped into the diner, eyes scanning the room like a hawk searching for its prey. Douglas's heart hammered violently against his ribcage. He squinted through the dim light, trying to place the familiar face. As recognition snapped into focus, confusion tightened its grip around him. It was Mason Blake, the reclusive CEO of Anderson Enterprises, the very man whose secrets had thrust them into this whirlwind of danger. "What is he doing here?" he murmured, incredulous. "Keep quiet," Melody hissed, her fingers digging into his arm. He reluctantly pressed his back against the cool, unforgiving ground of the booth. His throat felt dry, the words just beyond his reach as the reality settled in around him. If Mason was here, it couldn't be good. Mason strolled toward the counter, his presence commanding attention. The waitress straightened as he approached, a hint of trepidation in her demeanor. Douglas caught a glimpse of something, an unmistakable agony shadowed in Mason's eyes. It was as if he was haunted by the very darkness they were trying to escape. "Two of them disappeared," he said, his voice low but sharp, cutting through the clamor of dishes and murmurs in the diner. "They know something, and I want their information." Douglas felt Melody stiffen beside him. Without hesitating, she reached for his hand, her grip intense and unwavering. They were trapped here, invisible beneath a table, just two scared kids hiding from the ghosts of choices they never made. "Why would he want us?" Douglas whispered, teeth clenched. The ground felt unsteady as he imagined the implications of Mason's words. What did they know that made them dangerous enough to hunt? "Because Anderson isn't just a company, it's a prison. And we hold the keys," she replied, her voice barely a breath as she maneuvered to peer through the crack under the booth. The waitress nodded at Mason, a flicker of fear crossing her face before she spoke. "Sir, maybe I can get someone to help, but enough." Mason barked, his intense gaze piercing through the diner's shadows. "This must remain quiet. I can't have this leaking to anyone." The energy in the room shifted. The diner felt smaller, closing in around them like a vice. Mason's next words sent a chill up Douglas' spine. "They're using music to control them, to control all of us," he muttered, rubbing his temples as if battling an invisible foe. "And it's only going to get worse unless someone stops it." What did he mean by music? What dark melody was capable of such power? Douglas exchanged a glance with Melody. Her eyes held a mix of determination and fear. They both understood whatever Mason had, whatever he feared, it was tightly intertwined with their next steps. They were at the precipice of something monumental, and they either had to jump or risk being left behind. Suddenly, Mason turned sharply, eyes landing right on their booth as if sensing their presence. Panic clawed at Douglas' throat. Had he been seen? Now or never, Melody breathed, her voice filled with resolve. Before his brain could catch up, they crawled out from under the table, instincts zipping into overdrive. They couldn't let Mason trap them here or back them into a corner. They had to run, to confront this ominous shadow once and for all. As they rose, the door swung open again, flooding the diner with eerie tumult. A flash of rain-soaked darkness loomed outside, and the unmistakable chill of dread rushed in alongside it. "Douglas!" Melody exclaimed, her eyes widening as she glanced past him. He turned slowly, dread curling in his gut. It was the suited men, and they were locking eyes with the CEO, their purpose clear. The hunt was on. "Go!" Melody shoved him forward, forcing movement even as chaos erupted around them. "We can't let them take us." As they fled for the exit, the weight of unanswered questions lingered in the air. What depths were they about to plunge into, and what secrets would they unearth? Only time would tell. The bell above the diner door jingled furiously as Douglas and Melody burst through the exit, gasping for air like fish out of water. The grim rain poured down, soaking them instantly, but they didn't stop to catch their breath. They darted into the darkness outside, hearts pounding like wild drums. "Where do we go?" Douglas shouted over the roar of the rain. Melody glanced around, her brow furrowed in determination. "The alleyway. We can't let them corner us." They cut left, ducking into a narrow alley littered with discarded trash cans and forgotten dreams. The slick pavement glistened beneath the erratic streetlights. Every sound echoed in the confined space, amplifying their fear. Footsteps were heavy behind them, menace trailing like a shadow. They stopped for a moment, catching their ragged breaths. Close calls had become their normal, but this felt different. The suits were relentless, and Mason's words echoed sharply in Douglas's mind. Music was control. But control over what? "Should we confront him?" Melody asked, her voice shaking, but her resolve was rock solid. "Yes, holding something back. If we confront Mason, we could turn this around." "Are you out of your mind?" Douglas shot back, nearly slipping on the wet pavement. "Yes, the last person we can trust right now. He controls everything." Before Melody could respond, a soft but ominous tune wafted through the air. It was haunting, melodic, and instantly chilling. They exchanged worried glances, the kind that spoke volumes. "What was happening?" "Do you hear that?" Melody whispered, her eyes wide in disbelief. The music seemed to seep from the very walls of the alley. "Yeah, but where is it coming from?" Douglas felt an icy grip around his heart. The distant sound wrapped around them like a cold embrace, tugging at something deep within. The alley was closed off at both ends. The only way forward was deeper into the labyrinthine darkness. "We need to move, now," he urged, grasping her hand tightly, the pulse of their connection steadying his rising panic. The music swelled, notes fluttering and twisting, becoming almost sentient as they pushed deeper into the shadows. Their steps quickened, swift and desperate, but the melody tugged at their senses, luring them like moths to a flame. "I think it's coming from down here." Melody pointed toward a flickering light at the end of the alley. They sprinted forward, moving past the trash and debris, heartbeats racing, the music intensifying with every step. As they approached the light, they discovered a door hanging ajar. It swung slightly, beckoning them inside. The flicker of the bulb cast eerie shadows that danced along the walls. They stopped, breathless, balancing on the precipice of choice. "Should we?" Douglas asked, uncertainty gripping him harder than before. Melody nodded, a fierce determination igniting her spirit. "We have to find out. This might be what Mason was scared of." With a shaky breath, they stepped into the room, the music wrapping around them like an invisible rope. The moment they crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut behind them, sealing their fate. Inside, the air pulsated with energy, and in the center of the room stood a turntable, vintage and cloaked in darkness. A single record was spinning, its label smeared with an unreadable title. The haunting melody poured from hidden speakers, and Douglas felt his mind quaking with dread. "What is this?" he whispered, glancing at Melody, whose confusion mirrored his own. Suddenly, the music shifted, weaving a new thread sharp and unsettling. A whisper broke through the sound, echoing in the recesses of their minds, carrying secrets that should never be unearthed. "Melody, listen." Douglas's voice trembled, feeling the weight of the moment. What secrets would this twisted song reveal? What trap had they stumbled into? The darkness thickened around them, closing in like a noose as the melody crescendoed, drowning out all else. One question shot to the surface. Once they discovered the truth, would they be able to escape it? The lights flickered overhead, casting long shadows that danced along the walls, and for a moment, Douglas felt as if they were being watched. It was a sensation that gnawed at his insides, setting his nerves on fire. Melody stood frozen, eyes wide, her breath hitching in her throat at the overwhelming presence of the melody. "Can you hear it?" she murmured, struggling to keep her voice steady. The record spun relentlessly, drawing them deeper into its hypnotic pulse. Each note had grown sharper, more demanding, as if it were calling to something different within them, a truth long buried. Despite every instinct screaming at him to run, Douglas felt rooted to the spot. The whispers intensified, rising above the music, their words an indecipherable murmur that teased the edge of his understanding. "What if it's trying to tell us something?" he whispered, tremors coursing through him. Melody met his gaze, the connection between them sparking with something electric. "We can't let it control us," she said, firming her resolve. But even as she spoke, the room grew colder, the air thick with a sense of urgency. Suddenly, the turntable began to distort, the record wavering under an unseen pressure. Melody took a step forward, drawn to its inexplicable energy as the whispers morphed into a chorus filled with despair. "This isn't good, Melody," Douglas warned, heart racing, but it was too late. Melody reached out and cleared her throat, the instinct to sing overwhelming her better judgment. "I need to know," she declared, her voice rising above the chilling orchestration as she began to hum along. No sooner had she opened her mouth than the room erupted with a bone-chilling screech. The music transformed, warping into something dark and sinister, laced with echoes of fear and anger. Douglas felt his skin crawl as a sudden wave of nausea crashed over him. "Stop, please," he yelled, but her voice had taken on a life of its own. The walls around them pulsed, images unfurling in the shadows, fragments of stories, twisted faces trapped in silence. Douglas's heart raced as he realized what they were witnessing, the nightmares of those who had stood where they were now, leaving their essence trapped in the melody. "Melody, stop," he insisted, grabbing her arm, but she simply looked at him, eyes glazed over in a trance. The song's fear seeped into their bones, and a cacophony of voices crashed like waves around them, each begging for release. He knew they needed to run. Every instinct told him this was no ordinary song, but how could he pull her away? His own resolve began to slip, the fear wrapping around him like fog. Every beat of the ethereal music felt tied to his essence, drawing him into its deadly embrace. In a last desperate attempt, he yanked Melody back, and she jerked her head, breaking the trance. "What are we doing? We need to get out." As they turned to flee, the door slammed shut with a deafening finality, trapping them further within the nightmare. Panic surged through Douglas as the music crescendoed, the whispers intensifying into a maddening roar that seemed to awake something from deep within. Melody gasped, eyes wide as she pointed ahead. The shadows began to coalesce, revealing ghostly figures, anguished faces twisted in pain, reaching out towards them. His heart raced. What were they really facing? The truth was murky, draped in layers of terror and mystery. I don't know if we can escape this," he shouted, the threatening figures inching closer with every beat of the song, each note bleeding into their resolve. But as he braced himself for the worst, a flicker of defiance ignited within him. There had to be a way out. They just needed to uncover the truth behind this wretched song. As the darkness threatened to consume them, one thought spat through his mind: was there someone or something controlling it all? And at that moment, the melody shifted yet again. this time filled with an urgency they couldn't ignore. "Douglas, we have to face it," Melody cried, and with that, they steeled themselves for the chilling confrontation that awaited. What had Mason hidden in this twisted music, and was their own fate already entwined within its haunting notes? With one last glance back at the shadows closing in, they steeled their nerves, but could they confront the darkness before it claimed them completely? With a collective breath, Douglas and Melody squared their shoulders, their hearts racing to an erratic beat that echoed the pulsating rhythm of the turntable. The shadows shimmered and twisted like smoke, the ghostly figures inching closer, each tortured face screaming without sound, their mouths moving in exaggerated silence, begging for release. "Stay close to me," Douglas urged, gripping Melody's hand tightly as he searched the dark room for any means of escape. The oppressive atmosphere clung to them like wet cloth, suffocating hope. There had to be a way out of this nightmare. But the more he strained his ears, the stronger the Melody's grip became, pulling at their thoughts, clouding their minds. "Do you feel it?" Melody whispered, her voice shaking. "It's like it wants something from us, something it can't have." "I know," he replied, glancing nervously toward the figures that loomed closer. "But we can't give in to it. We need to resist." Suddenly, the shadows writhed and liquefied, morphing into a swirling void. Douglas felt his stomach lurch as the darkness expanded like a black hole, threatening to swallow everything whole. "What is happening?" he shouted over the maddening uproar of voices. "Listen," Melody exclaimed, her eyes brightening for the first time, although fear still flickered across her face. The melody had changed again. And it had. The once terrifying notes now held a haunting lilt, filled with a deep sorrow that tugged at their heartstrings. The cries of agony transformed into mournful echoes, revealing glimpses of memories lost, forgotten laughter, fading joy, and hearts broken. It felt achingly familiar, like a memory just out of reach. Melody Douglas hesitated, their connection deepening beyond the palpable fear. What if we give it a voice? What if we sing back? But Melody shook her head, vulnerability tugging at her lips. What if we become part of that darkness? What if we vanish? The figures hovered closer, intertwining with their thoughts. Without thinking, Douglas squeezed her hand, a lifeline in the chaos. "We have to try. If we don't, we'll be lost forever." Melody nodded slowly, bravery coursing through her veins. "On three," she said, her determination surfacing even in despair. 1, 2, and they sang. Their voices intertwined, rising above the clamor, immersing them in a warm glow that fought against the cold. The melody shifted once more, absorbing their words, blending their pain with its own. It became a conversation, a plea for understanding, each note shimmering with countless stories of horror, hope, and desire. The wailing figures stilled momentarily, their twisted faces transforming. They listened, disbelief shimmering in their ghostly eyes. But just as it seemed the connection might break the spell, the shadows recoiled and roared, slashing through the air like claws. "Don't stop!" Douglas shouted, panic streaking through him as the room began to quake. The shadows surged, furious at their defiance. But still they sang, pouring their hearts into the void until the oppressive terror turned into an unpredictable rhythm that called something deep within their souls. The dark chorus of spirits trembled, wavering against the power of hope and heartache. As their last note faded into the sinister hum, a deafening silence followed. The darkness hesitated, a brief moment of stillness that wrapped around them, a fragile peace in the looming chaos. But then, with fiery rage, the shadows lashed out in a furious wave, and the turntable spun wildly, threatening to tear apart the very essence of their resolve. "Douglas!" Melody screamed, fear palpable as the room began to dissolve into chaos. Just before the darkness swallowed them whole, a flicker of light pierced through the shadows, one last desperate chance to find the truth hidden within the melody, and perhaps their own fates. They had faced the haunting silence, but were they about to awaken something far worse? The flicker of light pulsated like a heartbeat, vibrant and alive, cutting through the heaviness that weighed down the air. Douglas locked eyes with Melody, and for a fleeting moment, he saw the shimmering resolve behind her fear. They could lose themselves in the shadows, or they could chase that glimmer, that promise of escape from both the darkness and their own despair. "Let us go," he yelled, breaking from her grasp and racing toward the light. The shadows screamed in fury, their anguished wails echoing around them, an orchestra of pain wrapped in a long-lost melody. Just ahead, the light danced, and every instinct screamed for him to reach it. Melody hesitated, torn between desire and dread. "Douglas, what if it's a trap? There's no time to think," he urged, pulling her towards the light. Every step felt like wading through molasses, the oppressive force of the dark entities pushing back against them. They moved in sync, desperation fueling their every motion. As the light drew closer, it morphed into a doorway, its edges shimmering like silver ribbons threading through the night. When they reached it, Douglas felt an overwhelming rush of warmth and hope. With a swift glance back, he saw the shadows regrouping, their twisted forms consolidating into something monstrous and unfathomable. "On three," he shouted, adrenaline coursing through him. 1, 2, 3. They burst through the threshold, colliding into a different world. The haunting echoes fell silent, replaced by an eerie stillness that vibrated with uncertainty. They stumbled into what seemed like a dilapidated room. The remnants of long-forgotten memories hung heavy in the air. Dust motes danced in the unnatural light, swirling like fireflies trapped in a jar. "Where are we?" Melody asked, her voice trembling as she surveyed their surroundings. Douglas's gaze darted around, half expecting the shadows to follow them. "I don't know," he breathed, "but I feel lighter." As they absorbed the strangeness of the room, something began to materialize in the air. One by one, figures coalesced from the shadows, not the tortured souls they had just encountered, but instead, weary faces of former office workers. They wore expressions of longing and sadness, their eyes brightened by memories of lost ambition and broken dreams. "Help us," one voice emerged from the group, cracking like old wood. "We were trapped here, just like you. The melody binds us." "Melody?" Melody echoed, confusion painting her features. "What melody?" "The song that never stops," another figure rasped. "It lures you in with false hope, but it's a lie. You need to break the cycle. Only then can you escape." "The shadows are feeding on your fear," the first voice continued, urgency pouring from their translucent forms. "You must remember who you are, sing your truth." As realization dawned upon them, Douglas felt a cold prickle creeping down his spine. The flickering light dimmed, and the shadows slithered along the edges of the room, their presence greater and more imposing than they had ever been. "Sing?" Melody whispered incredulously. "How can we possibly do that now?" "We have to," Douglas insisted, the weight of the moment pressing against him like a heavy stone. The specters glided closer, their faces a tapestry of pain and anger. He understood now that the melody was not just an echo of the past, but a reflection of everything they carried within themselves, their regrets, their hopes, their very essence. "We can't lose ourselves," he reminded her, squeezing her hand tightly. "We have to fight for our voices." But just as they prepared to respond to the spectral call, the shadows surged forward with an almighty roar. The door behind them began to close, sealing their escape. "Douglas!" Melody cried, panic surging through her, and he felt the walls closing in yet again. As the darkness rushed upon them, they teetered on the edge of resolve and fear, every heartbeat echoing within the suffocating silence. Before the shadows could engulf them once more, Douglas took a deep breath, and seeing Melody's trusting eyes, he found the strength to reclaim their song. "Together!" he shouted. Just as they opened their mouths to deliver a unified cry, the very fabric of the room twisted ominously. In that instant, the shadows hesitated, and what lay ahead became a twisted reflection of their darkest fears and their deepest selves. Would their song break through, or would it only unleash the full wrath of the nightmare? In the heart of chaos, a choice lingered. Would they risk everything to find their voices, or would they become part of the darkness, eternally silenced? The shadows surged, their twisted forms churning with insatiable hunger, but Douglas felt a fire ignite within. As he grasped Melody's hand, adrenaline coursed through him like a wildfire. "We can do this," he whispered, his voice trembling with both fear and newfound courage. "We can fight back." The air crackled with uncertainty, but together they stepped forward, feeling the weight of the other's spirits urging them on. "We're not alone," he reminded her. "We carry the weight of all those lost before us." Melody nodded, uncertainty morphing into resolve. "We sing not just for ourselves, but for them," she proposed, her voice steady despite the tremors of panic coursing through her. Rallying the memories of anguish and hope, they stood taller, drawing strength from the very essence of those long gone. "Let us show them who we really are," Douglas shouted, igniting the embers of belief they had nearly extinguished. With a synchronized breath, they raised their voices in defiance. The room shook with their cries, reverberating through the fabric of reality. The dark melody that had once entangled them began to unravel, each note becoming clearer, sharper, more vibrant as they poured everything into that sound. The shadows shrieked, their anguished cries clashing against the power of their resolve. It was a symphony of emotions, fear mixed with rage, sorrow blended with hope. The walls cracked under the pressure of raw energy, spiraling them into a dimension filled with blinding light. "Keep going," Melody shouted, her voice rising above the chaos, fueled by the spirits surrounding them. Together, they harmonized, filling the air with a vibrant energy that sent the shadows reeling backward. They sang for the dreams that had been haunted, for the ambitions lost in despair, for every moment that had been stifled under the weight of greed. The turntable sputtered violently as a wave of warmth collided with the cold darkness, entwining with their song, entwining with the lives that had been stolen. The figures began to shimmer, no longer just shadows. They transformed into echoes of vibrant souls, their faces lighting up as they joined the anthem of liberation. As their voices crescendoed, Douglas glanced at Melody, whose eyes shone bright with fierce determination. Together, they became a beacon of light against the encroaching void. They fought not just for survival, but for truth, empowering each note with the promise of release. With a final surge, they shouted out their shared truth, a proclamation that echoed through the darkness, a melody of empowerment, love, and unbreakable will. The shadows recoiled violently, revealing flashes of the truth hidden beneath the visceral pain behind corporate greed, the sacrifices made for profit, and the human cost of ambition. As the last notes dissipated, the shadows fractured, crumbling into dust as the figures of lost spirits began to fade into light. "Thank you," one whispered softly, gratitude pouring from its essence. A wave of warmth washed over Douglas and Melody, binding them to the departing souls, wrapping them in a shroud of comfort. Did we really do it?" Melody breathed, her voice barely above a whisper. The room pulsed with newfound light, a refuge forged from the truth they had embraced. The remnants of darkness receded, revealing a way out. Reassurance settled in Douglas's chest. "We faced it. We turned the music around to reflect our truth," he said. As they stepped forward into the light, the weight of burdens and shadows fell away, one step at a time. No longer chained by silence, Douglas felt a smile crack through the icy facade he had worn for years. In the embrace of warmth and clarity, Melody met his gaze. "We did it together," she said, her voice potent with understanding. "We'll keep singing our truth." With a deep breath, they moved into the open world, reborn into a realm teeming with possibilities. The skyscraper loomed behind them, now just a memory. They were no longer wrapped in the chains of corporate greed, but free to explore. In that moment of liberation, he clasped her hand tighter, realizing how critical it was to face the darkness and uncover the truth together. And deep down, they both understood they would be unstoppable. Now, the night sky stretched above them like a vast canvas waiting to be painted. United in their newfound freedom and purpose, they stepped into the unknown, eager for the melodies yet to be sung. This was their farewell to everything that had held them prisoner. The echoes of lost dreams turned into a hopeful harmony, guiding them into a future that sparkled with the promise of brighter days ahead. But before they could chase those dreams, they had to ensure others wouldn't be silenced again. And as they carried their message into the new dawn, they knew the fight for truth was far from over. You need to subscribe now. Don't wait even one more second to join the journey. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and ensure these stories continue. I want to hear your thoughts. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about what you just read. And do me a favor, share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Every action counts in our community, and only true fans understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions. Let's dive into the next adventure together.